My wife Linda walked into the courtroom confident that she'd walk out with half of everything I built over 14 years. What she didn't know was that I had documented every single betrayal over the past 3 months. When I handed a file to the judge, the look on her face changed completely. And in that moment, I knew our lives would never be the same again. My name is David Mitchell. I'm 42 years old, and I'm the Director of Corporate Security at Tech Secure Solutions in Denver, Colorado. During 14 years of marriage with Linda, we built a life as solid as the Rocky Mountains that surround our city. Our family routine ran like a well-oiled protocol: coffee at 7, dinner at 6:30, kids in bed by 9. Family was always my top priority, even with frequent travel for security audits. Our bank account was more than stable, with well-planned investments and an emergency fund that gave us peace of mind. Linda seemed content with our organized life, often commenting on how lucky we were to balance career and home. Our house in Highlands Ranch was the perfect reflection of a couple living the American dream. But when you work in corporate security, you develop a sixth sense for when something's off. Small signs started bothering me, like when Linda suddenly had late meetings 3 times a week. She said the company was expanding and needed more aggressive strategies, but something in her tone felt wrong. My wife had always been open about work, but these conversations became vague and evasive. It was like she was reading from a rehearsed script, lacking the natural ease I'd known for over a decade. Her behavior with her phone changed drastically, from casual to obsessive. Linda used to leave her phone on the table during meals, but now she kept it face down and even took it to the bathroom. When messages came in during family time, she'd check them quickly with a tense look masked by a forced smile. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the kitchen table. It was a message from a contact I didn't recognize. Seemingly small details began forming a pattern. The changes in spending stood out during our monthly finance review. Charges from upscale restaurants during work hours, purchases from stores she'd never visited before, and spa expenses across town started to appear. When I asked about it, she explained it as networking investments, but I never saw reimbursements hit our bank account. It felt like she was living a parallel life I wasn't part of, and my instincts told me this betrayal of transparency was just the beginning. During a trip to Seattle, I decided to run a simple test I use in corporate investigations. I called at random times for 3 days, always using excuses about forgotten documents. Twice, Linda didn't answer, and only called back an hour later, saying she was in a closed-door meeting. The strange part? Her company's receptionist told me she had left early for a personal appointment. I realized something was being deliberately hidden. What disturbed me most was the shift in our intimacy, not just physical, but emotional. Linda had always been warm and communicative, but our conversations had become shallow and transactional. It was like she was physically present but mentally checked out, always distracted and in a hurry. When I tried to hug her or open up emotionally, she made excuses about being tired or stressed over deadlines. The woman I knew was being replaced by a distant, calculated version of herself. But what I didn't realize at the time was that those late meetings and unexplained expenses were just the tip of a much larger iceberg. Linda had been building a secret life right under my nose, using tactics I should have recognized immediately. The irony was bitter. I spent my days protecting a company from external threats, while my own wife was orchestrating something I still couldn't fully understand. It was time to apply my professional skills to my personal life, even if that meant uncovering truths I'd rather not face. The bomb dropped on a Monday morning when a lawyer I'd never seen before rang our doorbell at 7:30 a.m. Linda was on a business trip. At least that's what she'd told me the previous Friday. The man handed me a sealed envelope and said my wife had requested that I sign the documents and return them within 48 hours. When I opened the envelope, I found a fully prepared divorce petition, where she was asking for half of everything we owned. What shocked me most was the calculated coldness of the whole process. Linda had hired one of the most aggressive attorneys in Denver, known for landing multi-million-dollar settlements. In the paperwork, she cited irreconcilable differences, as if our marriage were just a business contract that had expired. It felt like she'd planned my termination from my own family without giving me a chance to defend myself. I called Linda immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. When she finally called back at 9 p.m., her voice was distant, almost professional. She said she'd made the decision after a lot of thought and wanted to handle everything civilly and quickly. The call lasted less than 5 minutes and ended with her saying her lawyer would be in touch. I responded with just one word: understood. I didn't yell, I didn't beg, I didn't ask about another man. My experience in corporate security taught me that emotional reactions compromise your ability to think clearly. I simply hung up and started thinking like a professional dealing with an internal threat. It was only after I began digging that I found proof of the betrayal. Checking our online bank account, I discovered suspicious transfers she had made over the past 3 months. Expenses at high-end restaurants during work hours, payments to a consultant I didn't recognize. Linda wasn't just leaving me, she was systematically robbing me. The timing of all this was no coincidence. The rush to settle things civilly, the calculated coldness of every move, the unexplained spending. Something much bigger was going on, and Linda was trying to get me out of the way before I found out. She had underestimated who she was dealing with. That night, one word came to mind: revenge. But not the impulsive kind that burns everything down. The cold, calculated kind I used against corporate threats. Linda wanted to play this professionally, not realizing I had investigative resources that could uncover far more than she ever imagined. What I didn't know was that the divorce filing was just the first piece of a much more dangerous puzzle. Linda wasn't just pushing me aside for another man. She was cutting me off from something that could compromise national security. It was time to find out exactly what I was dealing with, and Linda had just given me the perfect reason to use every tool I had. After I hung up the phone, I stood in the kitchen for exactly 5 minutes, just breathing and organizing my thoughts. My experience in corporate security had taught me that the first 24 hours after uncovering an internal threat are crucial to a successful investigation. I grabbed my phone and started making a list, not of emotions or regrets, but of concrete actions I needed to take. Linda had underestimated who she was dealing with. The first call was to Marcus Kellerman, one of the top divorce attorneys in Denver, known for protecting executives in high-stakes separations. I scheduled a meeting for the next day and asked him to prepare a full analysis of our assets, including any accounts Linda might be hiding. I explained that I suspected financial betrayal, in addition to the emotional one, and that I needed someone who understood both family law and financial crimes. Over the next 3 days, I turned my home office into a silent operations center. I reviewed every single bank statement from the past 6 months, cataloging each suspicious transaction, and creating a detailed map of Linda's spending. I found transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, recurring payments to companies that didn't seem to officially exist, and even cash withdrawals always made at specific times. The pattern that emerged from the financial data was disturbing, but I still couldn't fully grasp what it meant. Linda's expenses followed a logic I didn't recognize, like she was following instructions from someone more experienced in hiding financial trails. Every discovery convinced me more and more that something much bigger was behind this sudden divorce filing. I hired a private investigator who had worked with me on corporate leak cases, explaining that I needed intel on my wife's recent contacts. Within 48 hours, he brought me detailed reports on Linda's movements, including the places she visited and the people she regularly met with. The information confirmed my suspicions. She wasn't acting alone. The investigator also found inconsistencies in the professional background of this Thomas consultant Linda kept mentioning. The man appeared to have multiple professional identities and connections to companies operating in sensitive sectors. That set off every security alarm I had, because I recognized patterns I'd seen in corporate espionage cases. For an entire week, I meticulously documented every piece of evidence I collected, organizing everything into encrypted digital folders that Linda could never access. Every bank transaction, every suspicious meeting, every inconsistency in her story, it was all being cataloged with the same precision I used in corporate investigations. My family might be falling apart, but I wasn't going down without a fight. But what I didn't know yet was that this financial and behavioral evidence was just the surface of something far more dangerous and complex. Linda wasn't just betraying me for personal reasons. She was involved in something that could compromise not just our family, but the security of information I was sworn to protect. It was time to find out exactly what I was dealing with, and I had all the tools to uncover this conspiracy. The discovery that changed everything came through a call from my private investigator at 6 a.m. on a Thursday. He had gained access to Thomas Kellerman's phone records and uncovered something that made my blood run cold. Thomas wasn't just a consultant with multiple identities. He was Tomasz Kowalski, an expert in industrial espionage with direct ties to foreign governments. My wife wasn't just cheating on me with another man. She was selling secrets that could compromise national security. The investigator sent me a fully encrypted email containing a detailed dossier revealing the true scope of the operation. Linda had photographed classified documents I kept at home, copied login credentials for TechSecure's systems, and even recorded phone conversations about sensitive government projects. Every one of her late meetings lined up perfectly with days I worked from home, handling confidential materials. Thomas had turned my marriage into an intelligence operation, using Linda as a gateway to access information worth millions on the black market. But the most shocking discovery came when I analyzed the dates of the suspicious bank transfers I had found in our accounts. The payments began exactly 3 days after TechSecure landed the most important contract in our history, developing cybersecurity systems for U.S. military bases overseas. Linda wasn't just being paid to betray me personally. She was being paid to sell secrets that could expose American soldiers to coordinated cyber attacks. At that moment, I realized this wasn't about marital betrayal or personal revenge anymore. It was about national justice and protecting American security. The investigator showed me evidence that Thomas had used the same method, with at least 4 other wives of defense executives in the past 3 years. Each one had filed for divorce suddenly after months of a secret relationship, and in every case, confidential information from the husband's companies had leaked to foreign competitors. The urgency became clear when the investigator told me Thomas was planning to leave the country the following week, carrying a flash drive containing all the data he had collected through Linda. This included not only TechSecure intel, but also data from other similar operations. If he managed to leave the U.S., that information would fall into the hands of hostile governments who could use it against American military installations. That's when I made the most important decision of my professional and personal life. I called the FBI directly and requested an emergency meeting, explaining that I had evidence of an industrial espionage operation threatening national security. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in a secure room with federal agents, handing over all the evidence I had gathered on Linda and Thomas. The FBI agents were impressed with the quality of the material I'd compiled and informed me that my case was key to dismantling a spy network that had been operating for years within the United States. They asked me to continue acting normally while they prepared an operation to capture Thomas and other members of the network. Linda would be arrested the moment she tried to pass on more information, and everyone involved would face charges of treason and espionage. But what I didn't know at the time was that Linda and Thomas had realized something was off and were accelerating their plans to flee the country. The divorce hearing scheduled for the following week wasn't just a legal formality. It was the perfect smokescreen for them to vanish with all the stolen data. It was time to execute the most important counterstrike of my life, and I had exactly 72 hours to help the FBI capture a spy network that threatened the safety of thousands of American soldiers. The operation began exactly at 9 a.m. on a Monday, while I was sitting in the Denver courthouse next to my attorney. Linda arrived with her aggressive lawyer, confident she'd walk out with half of everything I'd built over 14 years. What she didn't know was that I had spent the entire night coordinating the final details of an operation with the FBI, an operation that would change our lives forever. When the judge asked if I had anything to declare before we started the division of assets, I simply stood up and handed over a sealed envelope. Inside was a complete copy of the dossier I had compiled on the espionage operation. including photos of Linda handing documents to Thomas, records of the wire transfers, and the true identity of Tomasz Kowalski. The judge opened the envelope, skimmed the first few pages, and immediately suspended the hearing, instructing everyone to remain in place. Within 10 minutes, FBI agents entered the courtroom and walked straight over to Linda and her lawyer. She looked at me in total shock, as if she had finally realized she had completely underestimated who she was dealing with. The lead agent read her rights as she was handcuffed, explaining she was under arrest for industrial espionage and treason against national security. Simultaneously, a second FBI team was executing a search and seizure warrant at the house where Thomas had been hiding, preparing to flee the country that same afternoon. They found not only the flash drive containing the stolen data, but also documents linking him to at least 6 other similar operations targeting U.S. defense contractors. My wife wasn't just a traitor. She was part of an international spy ring threatening the safety of thousands of American soldiers. The most shocking revelation was that Linda had known exactly what she was doing from day one. During interrogation, agents learned she'd been recruited 2 years before Thomas entered our lives, and that their entire relationship had been orchestrated specifically to gain access to the information I brought home. The divorce wasn't just about being with another man. It was about making sure I didn't uncover the operation before they could steal everything they needed. Justice was swift and unforgiving. Within hours, our joint bank account was frozen. All assets Linda had tried to claim in the divorce were blocked, and she lost not only her freedom, but any legal right to our family. The judge immediately canceled all divorce proceedings and granted me full custody of the children, acknowledging that Linda posed a threat to both national and family security. As I left the courthouse that afternoon, I received a call from TechSecure's chief of security, informing me that I had been promoted to a strategic role in the company's counterintelligence division. What had started as a forced ejection from the life I knew had become an opportunity to serve my country in a way I never imagined. The revenge I had once sought had grown into something far greater, the protection of American national security. But what I didn't expect was to learn, through FBI interrogations, that Linda had meticulously documented every piece of information she stole from me, including details about our children's routines and vulnerabilities in our home that could be used against other military families. She hadn't just betrayed our marriage. She had turned our home into an operational base against the very country I had sworn to protect. It was time to rebuild not just my personal life, but also ensure that no other family would have to endure what mine had. 3 weeks after the arrest, Linda started sending me letters from the federal prison where she was awaiting trial. The first ones were desperate, begging for forgiveness and claiming she had been manipulated by Thomas from the start. She wrote about how our children needed their mother, and how our family could be rebuilt if I would just understand the situation. I read each letter once and then filed them in a folder that I handed directly to the FBI as additional evidence. When she finally managed to make a call from prison, I answered only to make it clear that there was nothing left to discuss. Linda cried, begged, tried to guilt me by talking about the years we spent together and how I was destroying our family. I replied with a single sentence: "You made your choices. Now live with the consequences." I hung up the phone and blocked all prison numbers. Justice had already been served, and I had no interest in dragging anyone's suffering out further. Her attorney tried to contact me several times, offering deals and claiming Linda was willing to cooperate further with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. I instructed my own lawyer to respond that I had no interest in negotiating anything with a traitor to national security. Every contact attempt was documented and sent to the FBI, who used the information to strengthen the case against her. The assets Linda had tried to claim in the divorce were permanently transferred into a trust fund for our children, ensuring she would never touch a cent of what we had built together. Our joint bank account was restructured, and I opened new accounts at different banks, eliminating any chance of her accessing our finances in the future. It was as if she had never existed in our financial life. The most satisfying moment came when I received the official notice that Linda had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for industrial espionage and treason against national security. She lost not only her freedom, but also all parental rights, any claim to the division of assets, and any possibility of receiving alimony or benefits from my work. Her removal from the life we once shared was now officially complete and irreversible. When neighbors asked about Linda, I simply replied that she was no longer part of our lives and changed the subject. No drama, no elaborate explanations, just the cold acknowledgement of a closed chapter. My wife had chosen to be a spy instead of a mother and wife, and now she was paying the price for that choice. With help from trauma-focused therapists, the children gradually began to understand that their mother had made choices that put our entire family at risk. They stopped asking when she would come home, and began adapting to a new reality where it was just the three of us. It was painful, but necessary, so we could move forward without the weight of the betrayal she had brought into our lives. 6 months after the sentencing, Linda sent one final letter, this time through her attorney, requesting to see the children once a year. I didn't even open the envelope. I handed it straight to my lawyer with instructions to reply that visits were not an option. The woman who had sold military secrets that could have cost American soldiers their lives didn't deserve the privilege of influencing my children's upbringing. It was time to build a new life, free from the shadow of the betrayal that had nearly destroyed everything I valued most. 2 years later, our lives had settled into an entirely new and surprisingly peaceful rhythm. The kids adjusted better than I ever expected to our new reality, and our home in Highlands Ranch became a real home for the first time in years. My promotion at Tech Secure allowed me to work more from home, which meant more time with my children and fewer trips pulling me away from the family. It was strange how the betrayal that nearly destroyed us turned into the opportunity to build something far more solid and genuine. Last week, I received an official letter from the Department of Homeland Security that completely changed my perspective on everything we had been through. They informed me that the intelligence I provided about Thomas's spy network had led to the dismantling of at least 8 similar operations across the country. Dozens of military and defense contractor families had been spared from going through what we did. The letter ended by thanking me for my exceptional service to national security and offering me a consulting position with the federal government. The most surprising part was learning that my case had become a reference study for identifying patterns of domestic espionage. FBI agents now use the techniques I developed to investigate Linda as standard protocol in similar cases. Knowing that our pain turned into protection for others gave a whole new meaning to what we lived through. The revenge I originally sought had become justice not just for me, but for hundreds of American families. Some nights, when the house gets too quiet and the memories come back, I reread that government letter and remind myself that something truly good came from all that destruction. My kids grew up stronger and more resilient. I discovered a calling I never knew I had, and our family became closer than it ever was when Linda was still part of it. My wife's betrayal didn't just reveal who she really was, it revealed who I could become. Today, I work directly with the FBI, training other security professionals to identify domestic threats, and our bank account is more stable than it's ever been. The kids only mention their mother when necessary, without bitterness but also without longing. They've understood that some people make choices that remove them from our lives permanently. It's a harsh lesson, but one that's prepared them for the real world in a way I never could have taught with just words. My new role allows me to travel the country helping other defense companies protect their data and staff from operations like the one that nearly destroyed my life. Every presentation I give, every protocol I create, every threat I help neutralize, is a small act of revenge against all the Thomas Kellermans out there. I turned my personal experience into a weapon against those who try to use our families against us. The irony is that by trying to take everything from me, Linda ended up giving me a life far better than anything I would have had if she'd remained the wife I thought I knew. Our kids now have a more present, more aware father who's prepared to protect them from any threat. I have a purpose that goes far beyond making money. I'm literally helping protect America's national security every single day. Sometimes, as I'm tucking the kids into bed and I see how strong and kind they've become despite everything, I realize the most perfect justice wasn't seeing Linda in prison. It was discovering that we're capable of turning the worst betrayal of our lives into the greatest opportunity for growth and service we've ever had. Some nights, when the silence grows heavy, I look at that government letter and remember that something truly good came out of all that pain, and that makes it all worth it. Looking back, I realize that Linda's betrayal wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my true life mission. That pain, which once felt unbearable, became the strength that allowed me to help protect hundreds of American families from going through what we did. The revenge I once sought evolved into something much greater, real justice and service to my country. Sometimes the worst experiences of our lives are exactly what we need to discover who we really are and what our true purpose is. And you, if you've made it this far, chances are you have your own story of betrayal or injustice. I want to hear from you in the comments. Share how you dealt with it and what you learned. Your story might inspire someone else who's going through something similar. Every comment matters to someone who's reading. If this story resonated with you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to keep getting more stories like this. Every week I share real accounts of people who turned their darkest moments into powerful victories. Your subscription helps build a community of support for anyone who needs a reminder that it's possible to overcome anything and build something better on the other side of pain.